info right now.
Perfect. So to answer your question, I have several large enterprise clients that have basically come to me and said, Tom, we're looking for a solution that can either stage a backup or deal with large data sets. So they've basically come to me and said, we've looked at other vendors and we believe that Acronis cyber infrastructure is the way to go forward. I did try to get more information off them, so obviously we can tailor it a bit more to their needs, because I know there's so much to cyber infrastructure, but they've actually not got back to me. I did try calling them before. So I think it'd be a case of trying to do an overview of cyber infrastructure and then showing them that recording, seeing what the clients say. And then if they've got any questions, I'll obviously send them to yourself, Simona, and we can really take it from there, I guess.
So the customer's goal is to use it as a backup storage location.
That's what I've understood of them, yeah.
Okay, to just store the backups on local disks attached to cyber infrastructure. Okay, I mean, that can be done. I'm not going to say it can't be done. The benefits of doing that are somewhat limited in the sense that you will, of course, have a very highly resilient backup storage if you're going to set it up with the right erasure coding for that. So we can do essentially something similar to RAID, but between multiple nodes. So even if an entire node fails, the others may still continue, working properly without any data loss.
Because I remember when we had our discussion over Cyber Protect, and obviously we touched a bit on it last time. It can also act as a bit of a staging as well. So when it's going through large data, it can use it as a stage to go to other locations.
If you wanted to use something else as the backend storage, like public cloud storage, for example.
Yeah, I remember you saying that.
Yeah, okay, so it can be used for that. And that is a more common use case than actually storing the backups directly on its local storage. Because if you're going to store the backups on local disks, then you could also achieve that by simply mapping those as a network share, which is much cheaper than buying cyber infrastructure licensing. It's not that I'm trying to tell you not to buy it, but obviously there's that consideration. But if you want to use it for staging as a backup gateway, essentially, to take those backups then out to public cloud, then yeah, that is a very common use case that it can perform. So the way it works is if we're talking an on-premise deployment where you install an Acronis management server in this enterprise customer's infrastructure. So in that kind of setup, you can also deploy an Acronis cyber infrastructure cluster. So it can be one node or it can be multiple nodes in this cluster. And you assign the backup gateway role to one or multiple of those nodes. And then as part of the setup of the backup gateway, you also add the location that is going to be the actual storage repository, whether it's public cloud storage, the local storage of the actual cluster, or it can also use an NFS share. So you could use cyber infrastructure as a gateway that then passes the backups on to an NFS share in the background, and that can sometimes be useful if you have a lot of Windows machines that don't necessarily work with NFS shares, and you want to send the backups over to NFS rather than SMB. There might be some security considerations that drive you to do that. In terms of how it works, I guess we can kind of go over the quick installation guide for it. Let me start sharing the screen. So the bare minimum installation for a backup gateway deployment. So we're not talking cyber infrastructure where you're actually going to store the data, or that you're going to use to maybe even run VMs there, like running, for example, the Acronis management server there, or spinning up some VMs in a disaster scenario on it. We're not talking about any of that. Just a backup gateway. These would be the minimal requirements. So it'll need to have at least 2 disks assigned to it. It can be a virtual machine, and if you want to make it very, very, low footprint. So it'll need at least 2 disks, one for the system to be installed on, and the metadata. Normally these would be separated, which would bring you to at least 3 disks, but they can be the same as long as it's a fast enough disk, and then 1 disk for storage, depending on your size requirements. If you're going to use it for staging to public cloud, then depending on the size of the backups, you might need to have a significant amount of local disk size as well, because obviously the public cloud doesn't accept you to send that data immediately or whenever you want as a backup start. So the gateway will have to stage more data in that kind of situation. If your backend is going to be an NFS share, then obviously there's no bottleneck there. The data more or less passes through, so you won't need a lot of staging capacity. This will also have an impact on licensing. The way this is licensed is capacity-based for the local storage, meaning for however many terabytes you're going to need as staging capacity, that's how much you'd have to license for the Acronis cyber infrastructure. When you're using NFS, for example, you can almost always get away without buying a license at all, because the trial version, if you will, the trial license that comes with it by default is unlimited in time, and it is only limited to 1 terabyte of capacity. So if you don't need more than 1 terabyte of staging capacity, then you can just use ACI as a backup gateway in trial mode for essentially ever, unless those terms change. But when you do it to public clouds, if it's small backups, you're probably going to be fine with 1 terabyte of staging capacity anyway. But if it gets larger, you'll probably need to expand that with a license on ACI. Then once you install it, so it's literally an operating system. You install it same as you would, I don't know, Linux, for example. There is a user interface for the installation. It's all pretty well documented here in terms of how to deploy it when you're planning on using it as a backup gateway, step by step. Essentially, you install it on all the nodes, join them to the cluster. If it's a single node, obviously just do it once for the primary node. And then at the end of that, you assign those nodes to backup gateway. You configure the backend storage. So you got here the 3 options: local storage, external NFS share, and public cloud storage. So within the ACI interface, you basically point it to whatever is going to be your backend storage for it, where the backups will actually go and sit. And obviously there's limitation considerations documented here as well for that. It explains step by step how to connect it, and you see there are a few listed here. It's basically, as long as it's S3 compatible, it should work. These are just the ones that have already been used and are known to work in terms of cloud platforms, and these are probably the most popular ones that you're likely to encounter out there. In terms of redundancy, obviously this is relevant when you start adding more disks and actually using it for storage. This is where it can become something more enterprise grade in terms of actually storing things on it, because you can change the encoding on the backup gateway to ensure redundancy in this setup at disk level, but you can have the failure domain at host level essentially as well. So if you have enough nodes, you can have a redundancy scheme. For example, we have ours here That's just an example that we can look through the console. We've got 8 different nodes, and in the redundancy on this, we're doing 5+2 encoding. So it's similar to how RAID 5 would be 3+1, let's say, at disk level. We're doing this with 5 primary and 2 parity, but at node level. So the disks in this 5+2 scheme are always spread across the nodes, so that whenever 1 or 2 nodes fail, we still have all the pieces needed to reconstruct the data on the remaining nodes. So it's resilient to failures of up to 2 hosts in this scheme. And there's a lot of schemes available, and obviously it also shows you how much overhead, so how much capacity you lose by using the encoding. Obviously, the most efficient one is going to be no redundancy, but then it can get pretty efficient once you have a lot of nodes in a cluster if it's going to be extremely large. Any questions based on what you've seen so far? Any?
No, it's very simple.
Ideas? I'll say there's a lot to it in terms of what it can end up doing, but at this basic level where you're just using it for backups as a means of pushing backups somewhere else, it's relatively straightforward once you install it, once or twice, and then play around with the relevant areas. Of course, the backup storage part and the backup gateway part of it. Basically, it's relatively straightforward.
What would you think then, hypothetically speaking, if you as an enterprise customer, what would the key features that you would look at? Because obviously I'm still waiting for them to reply. Do you think there's anything that you could add in your opinion that you could show on this demo that they may have not thought of?
Unfortunately, I can't really show much in terms, as in I can't really make any changes to this to show you kind of how it behaves when you change things or when things go down and something like that. The number one benefit of this is obviously the resilience part of it, if you're going to deploy a serious cluster with a lot of nodes. If we're talking the basic backup gateway just to push backups across, it is the only reason that somebody would use it is because it's the only way to get backups across to their desired repository, presumably in the public cloud. Those are pretty much all the use cases I know of is enterprise customers that either want to use this to push backups to a public cloud that they already have and that they have some kind of good deal on it, or they have it already and they want to use it, or they want to back up to a local repository, but due to some very stringent security policies, they don't want to use the default SMB or NFS protocols to back up directly to those those kinds of destinations. And with this, we're using a different port, a different protocol, basically, that the agents communicate with this. So it's much more secure in that sense. And then this communicates with the NFS, which can be put on a private network. So those are the two kind of considerations for it.
I know with the customers that are obviously asking for more information on this, they are in the process of looking to move to the cloud, and the other client, as you just touched upon, that got strict policies in place on the way that the backups are stored. So I think when we've just touched upon them there for both of the customers in question, the main one is the client that is moving to the cloud. That person is the one that is the most interested, and they've got a huge data set from what they've told me. I know actually that they're in the process of adding to that to make it even bigger with the amount of data that they go through. They did state that they are looking to move away from the current vendor that they are going with to go with one that was listed before, shown. And from what they've told me, I think they've said that they want to use it at first to stage it to help it go to the cloud, because obviously that's one thing that they wanted to do straight away. But then I've got the other customer who's wanted to use it on a security basis, because you just said then it uses a separate protocol. So I think the two customers in question, where you just touch upon them 2 points, then cover what they're ideally looking for. I think moving forward, once I do hear back from them, that what I'll do is I'll just show them this little bit of a recording that we've got here, and then if they've got any other information that they would like to add, so we can actually narrow down what they're looking for precisely, or if there's anything key particular. And then if they've got any other questions that could be asked, I'll send them to you, Simone, and then we can obviously start creating that plan, as I said, moving forward on getting the customers moved over to Acronis, whether it's Cyber Protect, infrastructure, or any of the other products under the Acronis name.
Right. I'm sure if Simona's muted or something.
I don't think she is. No.
We cannot hear you. And maybe try reconnecting or mute, unmute, who knows. Try reconnecting, sometimes that fixes it.
Yeah, I've just suggested that. The joys of technology. It's either your best friend or your worst nightmare.
Can you hear me?
We can now, yeah.
I think sorry, it's just that Zoom hates me these days. It's not the first time it happened to me. Yeah, so you're back to your question, Tom. Could you please repeat that? I think I've
Sure.
lost it for a second.
So I was just discussing obviously the 2 points that Gabe touched upon, and I was explaining about the 2 separate customers. One would be wanting it for the security benefits, so that they can use it their own way. The other customer is looking at one of the vendors that was listed to go to the cloud, but at the moment they're looking to expand their storage. So they would be using it for the other case that was touched upon then. So what I would be looking to do now is, obviously I've had the Cyber Protect demo and a bit of an infrastructure demo. I'm now going to go back to the clients in question that I've asked with this bit of a video. And then I will say to them, is there any questions that, would like to be asked? Or is there anything else that needs to be touched upon? And then I can liaise with yourself and we can start that plan moving forward. Because obviously cyber infrastructure, it's, as we said at the start, it's a very powerful solution. There's a lot to it. So I think the 2 customers in question need to give a bit more information so we can assist them better moving forward.
Right, yeah.
And then in the meantime, it'd be finishing that plan. What I've actually done is I've nearly finished it. I've created 3 documents. The first one is another vendor. The second one is the other vendor that we discussed last time. The third document is a breakdown of all the customers that I've currently got on backup solutions. I've said company A, for example, has got, say, 10,000 servers, 100,000 laptops, 20,000 desktops, for example. So I broke down each customer so we can kind of get a bit of an idea on what they can bring to myself and obviously to Acronis moving forward. Obviously, it may need a bit of tweaking with the numbers from what they gave me last time. So that's just narrowing out one of the steps of trying to find a bit on the infrastructure. And obviously, once I've sent that plan through in a couple of days, we can then start moving that plan moving forward and getting customers moved over to Acronis. And obviously, when we discussed last time, about the licensing. If they show a purchase order, I think that would be very beneficial to them.
Absolutely. As I said, we can treat each case separately, as each customer will have, I assume, a different environment, and there will be different number of licenses required. And once we know that, we can work on quotations, on offers. Please correct me if I remember. I think you mentioned to me that you work with CMS, right, in the UK
Yes.
as the distributor. Okay, so we can work together on the quotations and quotations for the end customer, and your reseller buying price will come from CMS, and the
Yes.
purchase order from you will go to CMS and CMS to us. That's the flow.
Not a problem. Well, thank you for sorting out this brief demonstration discussing a bit about cyber infrastructure. I'm now going to say, if we end the recording there, I'm going to get that